Hey everyone, this video today we'll be looking at the role of the lymphatic system. Specifically, we need to know what the role of the lymphatic system is in relation to the activation of our B and T cells from our third line of defense, and how the lymphatic system is used to transport and store our immune cells. So we've looked at a diagram similar to this previously when we spoke about B and T cells, and I think I spoke to you guys about your lymphatic system is essentially a system of vessels throughout your body, and throughout those vessels, which are highlighted in green in this diagram, we have I guess clumps of vessels called lymph nodes. Okay, so the lymph nodes are regions where there is a high concentration of these vessels, and we also find a lot of our immune cells there. So you can see that there are some lymph nodes around your tonsil region, your underarm region, your groin region as well. Okay, so there are quite a few locations where your lymph nodes are located, and the reason they are so important is that's where you are going to find some of the immune cells that are required to fight off a pathogen in those lymph nodes, obviously as well as throughout the rest of the lymph vessels, but that's their primary location. So what can we find in our lymphatic system? So I've told you it's a system of vessels that flows through your body. You don't find blood in these vessels. Instead, you find a fluid called lymph. Okay, so lymph is a clear yellowish liquid. You would have seen lymph being produced in your body if you've ever experienced a blister. Okay, so like you've got a new pair of shoes, they've been rubbing on you, you get a blister forming. If you've ever tried to pop a blister or had a blister pop, usually you have this clearish yellowish liquid come out. That's actually lymph leaking out of your lymphatic system that has been ruptured because of the rubbing of those new shoes. Okay, so like you're not going to die from it leaking out of you. It's the same as, getting a paper cut or grazing yourself. It might sting a little bit. If you don't keep it clean, you can get infected with bacteria and viruses, that sort of thing. But I guess that's where you would have seen it before. So this lymph fluid that's in your lymphatic system, it's pretty much produced from the extracellular fluid from your cells. So when your cells secrete fluid from them, that fluid ends up becoming the lymph that fills your lymphatic vessels. Interestingly, your lymphatic system only travels in one direction. It travels from, I guess, everywhere in your body to the vein near your heart. Okay, so in the previous diagram we saw you had lymph vessels all the way down your fingers, all the way to your toes, that sort of thing. They're carrying that lymph fluid from your fingers, from your toes, wherever it's located, all the way back to the core of your body to a vein that is located close to your heart. And that lymph fluid actually then gets pumped into your bloodstream so that any of those immune cells that are in your lymph fluid will be circulated through your circulatory system in your actual bloodstream. So your lymphatic system is really, really important because those antigen presenting cells, so your dendritic cells and your macrophages that you would find in the tissue all throughout your body, when they've engulfed a pathogen and they have destroyed it and held on to some of those non-self antigens from the pathogen and they've got them on their MHC class 2 markers, they need to be able to get those to a helper T cell, a B cell, a cytotoxic T cell as quick as possible so that they can activate the third line of defense. So their quick way of traveling through your body is using the lymphatic system. So the vessels of that lymphatic system so that they can be transported through the lymph nodes, hopefully interacting with a corresponding helper T cell, B cell, cytotoxic T cell, that sort of thing. And that would then trigger the third line of defense to begin. And some other information to be aware of is it's not just lymph vessels that make up your lymphatic system. There are different organs that are associated with it as well. So we've previously spoken about the thymus, I guess towards the top of your chest. So this is where our T cells develop, and we've also spoken about bone marrow being the place where your B cells developed. Remember, T cells start with T, thymus starts with T, B cells, bone marrow both start with B. Okay. Other organs that are quite important to recognize, obviously I've spoken a little bit about lymph nodes already. Those clusters in your lymphatic system where you can find a buildup of your immune cells. So in the diagram on the page here, we're seeing lymph nodes near your throat region, your underarms, and down near your groin region as well. Okay, so that's where you're going to find a high concentration of those B and T cells. And when the antigen presenting cells enter your lymphatic system, they're hopefully going to interact with a B or T cell in one of those lymph nodes and then trigger your third line of defense. In case you come across these terms, it's probably not likely, but just in case, if something is referring to a primary lymphoid tissue, they're referring to part of the lymphatic system that's responsible for developing your immune cells. So that would be the thymus and the bone marrow, okay, because that's where our B and T cells develop. All the other organs that are associated with your lymphatic system will be referred to as secondary lymphoid tissues, so the lymph nodes and the spleen, for example. And this image here is just trying to give you a bit of a more detailed representation of what's happening in one of these lymph nodes. So in the lymph node, we have our lymph fluid coming in here and here in this diagram. Okay, so that lymph fluid is coming in through this lymph node, and when it's doing so, the different regions of the inside of the lymph node usually contain different types of immune cells. So we can see that the pinkish region has our B cells, and that's where our antigen presenting cells that are entering the lymph node would interact with our B cells and then obviously trigger that to differentiate. And the region in purple is where you'll find your T cells. Okay, so again, we would expect our antigen presenting cells that have traveled into the lymph node via the lymph vessels to interact with our T cells in that purple region. So it's essentially coming in and moving through the pink and then the purple region right to the middle here, and then it'll leave the lymph node and continue out through the connecting lymph vessel to wherever it needs to go. Same thing will happen over this side. It'll move through, leading out to the other side. So this is really just trying to show you that those lymph nodes throughout your lymphatic system, I guess you could think of them as almost little pit stops where your antigen presenting cells need to stop, interact with B and T cells to try and find the corresponding B or T cell that has the corresponding receptor to the non-self antigen it contains. And hopefully it gets it on the first go, but it's probably not likely. Therefore, it's going to be traveling through quite a number of lymph nodes before it interacts with the corresponding B or T cell.